Okay, so get ready. Today we're diving deep into the research methodology of Sciencefact, examining the effects of T-consciousness fields. In the previous episode, we talked about Sciencefact and its investigations into T-consciousness, but here we'll focus more on the specifics of its methodology.
Yeah, you hear that and you might think like, okay, is this legit science or are we going off the deep end here?
Right, exactly, and that's what we're here to find out, right? We're going to break it down. In the previous podcast, we explained that Mohammad Ali Taheri, the founder of Sciencefact, introduces T-consciousness as the third and hidden yet fundamental element of this universe. Not just matter, not just energy, but something else entirely.
It's really a fascinating concept, and what's even more interesting is how they're approaching it scientifically.
Well, we've mentioned before that Cosmointel has its own scientific journal. Can you explain exactly what topics this journal and the research published in it have focused on?
Cosmointel's research published across multiple issues in their journal explores a wide range of topics, focused on the effects and applications of T-consciousness fields. Key areas include their impact on the brain, nervous system, COVID-19, cancer research, Alzheimer's disease, infertility, and microbiology, as well as their role in biomimetics, physics, and software engineering of molecules. Other studies investigate their influence on water molecules, living cells, and materials, even under unique conditions, like microgravity, and the effects of Taheri consciousness fields on thermoluminescence phenomenon, the function of Taheri consciousness fields, and the residual memory effect at the atomic levels of matter.
Wow, what a wide range. T-consciousness fields seem to affect almost everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Lay it on us. What's the methodology here?
They're working with this framework of assumption, argument, and proof, really trying to build a solid case.
Okay, so starting with that first part, the assumption. They're saying T-consciousness exists, and thousands of people have personally experienced its effects, especially in achieving lasting physical, psychological, and mental healing. Plus, Cosmointel has conducted its own lab research and shared findings about the impact of T-consciousness. But how does it work?
Well, that's the thing. They're not even trying to define it directly right off the bat.
Really?
Yeah. Instead, they're focusing on its effects, these things called T-consciousness fields, or TCFs for short. The T comes from the initial of Mr. Taheri's surname, distinguishing it from conventional definitions of consciousness. It's kind of like, think about gravity. You may not know exactly what gravity is, but we can see how it affects things.
Right.
It makes things fall.
Makes sense.
So they're looking for that kind of evidence, the observable effects of these TCFs, to prove they're real.
Smart. So how do they even start to study something like that, these invisible fields?
Well, they've got a 5-phase research plan.
5 phases. Sounds meticulous. Okay.
The first one, they call it Phase 0.
Okay.
It is all about quantitative and statistical analysis, along with a comparison between the control group and the treatment group, aiming to prove the effect of T-consciousness fields.
Makes sense. So what kind of effects are we talking about here? Give us some examples.
Well, the studies have shown a wide variety of effects across different subjects, including changes in microorganism growth rates, alterations in water pH, modifications to the physical properties of materials, and much more.
Okay.
And with Phase 1, they examine the diversity of effects caused by different TCFs. They are looking at a huge range of effects.
What kind of evidence do they have to back that up?
That's where their commitment to scientific rigor really shines.
Oh.
They're using double-blind methodology for most of their studies.
Can you explain double-blind studies in simple terms for our audience who might not know how they work?
In a double-blind study, the researchers and the team conducting the experiment in the labs don't know the details of this specific method of applying TCFs on the study subject. And on the other hand, the individuals who apply the TCFs don't know the details of how experiments are conducted on the study subjects. This approach ensures unbiased results and is a standard method in scientific experiments, especially in fields like medicine.
Did they make any exceptions in their research when it came to double-blind methods?
A double-blind methodology was employed throughout, with the exception of the study titled The Effect of T-Consciousness on the Mind and the Psyche, Psymentology, published in Volume 1, Issue 5 of the Scientific Journal of Cosmointel. This exception involved experiments conducted on human participants who were consciously aware of their connection or edesol, which we talk about in previous episodes, to the Cosmic Consciousness Network, or CCN, as well as their engagement with the teachings of Faradarmani and Psymentology, which we dedicated an entire episode to introducing the two alternative medicine approaches founded by Mr. Taheri.
Okay.
Where it helps eliminate bias.
I also read a point that might be worth mentioning here. Taheri says, one way to address certain problems and disorders is by developing a well-rounded and balanced worldview that fits the surrounding environment.
Yes, this idea is part of Taheri's theory on mentosomatic issues, explained in his book, The Human Worldview. According to him, distorted worldviews can lead to diseases called worldview-related or mind-body diseases. In simple terms, if a person has the wrong mindset, it can negatively affect their body.
All right, let's focus on the main topic. So they're seeing these effects, but can they explain how they're happening?
That's what they're trying to figure out in phase 2 and 3.
Okay, so phase 2.
Phase 2 is all about the WHY.
Get WHY.
Investigates the reasons behind the diversity of effects of T-consciousness fields.
And phase 3.
Phase 3 is digging into the how. Studies the mechanism of the effects of T-consciousness fields on matter and energy.
So like the nitty-gritty details of how these fields actually interact with stuff.
Exactly. This is where it gets really complex, pushing the boundaries of our current understanding.
Okay, so they're going deep, trying to figure out how these TCFs work, but where's it all leading? What's the big picture here?
Well, that brings us to phase 4, the most ambitious part.
This phase will draw broader conclusions. They propose that all matter has mind and memory as a
Yes.
software programming that drives and guides all its functions and stores its instructional and behavioral information.
They're trying to connect T-consciousness to the mind and memory of matter, maybe even the origins of consciousness itself.
Wow, we're talking big questions now. So this isn't just some fringe science project. They're aiming to revolutionize our understanding of, well, everything. And they found some pretty mind-blowing stuff along the way, right? Like, what about this biological dark energy? I've got to hear more about that.
Oh yeah, that's a fascinating one. They're talking about a huge amount of energy in living things that we can't explain with our current understanding of biology.
Okay, now that's intriguing. So they're saying this T-consciousness could be the source of this unexplained energy.
That's the idea, like there's this hidden energy source inside us.
In Issue 9,
Yeah.
Volume 1 of the Scientific Journal of Cosmointel, the concept of biological dark energy is introduced
Right.
based on laboratory observations. This refers to a large amount of energy instantly produced in living organisms, not through conventional cellular processes.
That's wild. So these fields could be influencing everything around us and powering us from within.
And it gets even weirder. Their research suggests that TCFs can actually decrease entropy.
Wait, hold on. Decrease entropy. Isn't that like breaking the laws of physics?
It seems that way, right?
These fields can actually decrease in entropy, commonly known as disorder.
So the opposite of what we normally expect.
Exactly. And they think the key to this might be something called T-information.
Okay, T information. We've heard that term a few times now. What exactly is it?
Think of it like the bridge between T-consciousness and the material world, the stuff we can see and touch.
Okay.
It's not just energy that's being transferred, but information, like a blueprint that guides how things organize and behave.
So T information is like a set of instructions, a code that shapes reality.
You got it. And through this T information, these TCFs can do some pretty wild things, like potentially reverse entropy, tap into this biological dark energy, all sorts of crazy stuff.
So we've got a third element in the universe, a potential source of unexplained energy, a way to maybe reverse entropy, and the fact that matter has mind and memory. Cosmointel has been part of several major international scientific events. Can you mention some of the most important ones?
Yes. The TSC conference in 2020, 2022, and 2024, where they presented their research on T-consciousness.
Yes.
The ILCA and CASL conference in October 2024, sharing findings on T-consciousness and liver cancer treatment.
Okay.
The EACR Congress in June 2024, showcasing their work on T-consciousness and cancer research.
Okay.
The IONS conference in mid-2024, where they explored the effects of T-consciousness fields on living and non-living systems.
All right.
And the Neuroscience Summer Symposium in August 2023, where they discussed neuroscience and consciousness studies, the definition and subordinative role of the brain.
It's clear that Cosmointel researchers have been incredibly busy in recent years,
Yes.
diving into a wide array of groundbreaking topics and making significant contributions across various scientific fields.
Yeah, it seems like they're really trying to put Mohammad Ali Taheri's theories on the map.
Look, one interesting point is that if the world of science wants to make new discoveries and find fresh answers, it needs to pay attention to these studies and empirical experiments, even if there aren't specialized reviewers for this field yet.
I completely agree. Just because these studies don't have specialized reviewers or because today's science doesn't fully understand these concepts, it doesn't mean we should ignore them.
Exactly. If that were the case, fundamental progress in science wouldn't happen. Every major discovery was once unknown and needed to be given a chance.
Exactly. The important thing is that the effects of Taheri consciousness fields are being recorded and documented in the lab.
That's right.
Whatever the reason may be, this phenomenon itself is astonishing and seems to merit the engagement of the scientific community, given the history of science and the fact that throughout history, many groundbreaking ideas that did not align with the prevailing knowledge of the time were dismissed.
Okay.
But then, years later, were validated and acknowledged as science advanced.
I agree. The scientific community should avoid repeating those mistakes.
Yes.
It remain open-minded and willing to actively engage with new areas of research in order to gain insights and evaluate the work directly.
And in the process, help establish a community of specialized reviewers that can validate the findings and assess the potential impact of this research and its scope of contribution to human health, quality of life, environment, and beyond.
I highly encourage our listeners to stay tuned as we continue exploring this intriguing topic in upcoming episodes. Be sure to check out the previous episodes to gain a deeper understanding of the concepts discussed and stay caught up with the material. Where can they go to learn more?
We'll be sure to include links to more information in the show notes, including resources on Mohammad Ali Taheri's work and the Sciencefact Research Center.
Awesome. And in the meantime, I think the best thing we can all do is stay curious, keep those minds open, and be open to the possibility that there's so much more to the universe and to ourselves than we currently understand.
Well said.
So until next time, keep those minds open and keep exploring the unknown.